4:08 in the afternoon, June 3, 1991. A mass of red-hot rock breaks loose from the summit of Mount Unzen, southern Japan. It has done this every day for 2 weeks straight. Every time, the burning avalanche dies out 2 miles below the summit. Half a mile past that line stand dozens of people, news crews, volunteer firefighters, police officers, taxi drivers, meters running. This time, the avalanche stops where it always stops. It doesn't cross the line by a single yard. But in the next 2 minutes, 43 people never make it off that slope. One of them has already cheated a mountain once before. The mountain had a history of its own. In 1792, one flank of it let go, sent a wave back out across the bay, and roughly 15,000 people never got clear of it. Still, the worst volcanic disaster in Japan's history. Then, for almost 2 centuries, it went quiet, long enough for people to stop being afraid of it. It woke up in November 1990. For 6 months, it looked almost harmless, steam and ash. Then, on May 20th, 1991, lava reached the summit, and it behaved nothing like the lava in the movies. Unzen's lava was too thick to flow. It squeezed upward and hardened right where it emerged, like cooling tar. Day after day, a pile of glowing rock grew on the summit. Heavier, steeper. A structure like that cannot hold itself up forever. Sooner or later, a piece breaks off. When it does, it comes down as a solid mass of scorching rock and ash that moves like a liquid at highway speed. Geologists call it a pyroclastic flow. The first one came down on May 24th, ran along the bed of the Mizunashi River, and died out before it reached the foot of the mountain. By then, one of the people watching that mountain was Harry Glicken. On May 18, 1980, he was supposed to be on watch at an observation post 6 miles from the summit of Mount St. Helens. A graduate school interview kept him away that day. His supervisor, David Johnston, took the shift instead.
Observations remain normal.
That morning, the north face of the mountain collapsed. Nothing was left of the post. Johnston's body has never been found. Glicken carried that for 11 years. He became one of the world's few specialists in volcanic slope collapse. By June 3rd, he would be standing on the flank of this same mountain, beside the most famous volcanologist couple on the planet, Maurice and Katja Kraft. By evening, none of the 3 would still be alive. Around the same time, a crew from the television station KTN filmed that first flow, first in the country. Headquarters sent them a telegram. Congratulations on a crushing victory. From that day on, the mountain was a competition. The flows kept coming. The riverbed gathered each one like a chute, and each one died out at roughly the same distance, a little past 2 miles from the summit, week after week, without exception. The people watching drew the only conclusion available to them. Danger has a boundary, and it runs right there. Beyond that boundary, 2.5 miles from the summit, on a rise beside an agricultural training center, sat a spot they called the fixed point. For weeks, it had been the best seat in the house. Officially, though, nobody was supposed to be there at all. There was an evacuation zone. On May 26th, on the advice of volcanologist Kazuya Ota, the mayor of Shimabara recommended that residents of 5 districts leave. A recommendation, not an order. The police checkpoint set up that same day covered 1 road. On foot, by back roads, people went up without trouble. The camera crews were not the only people on that rise. The volunteer fire brigade stood watch there because the wired mud flow sensor on the Mizunashi had been destroyed by one of the flows. Until it was replaced, human eyes were the only warning system the neighborhoods below had left. Taxis waited nearby, meters running. Journalists had hired them, and the drivers sat in their cars for hours. And local residents kept climbing back up to houses and fields that sat inside the evacuation zone. Somebody understood exactly what all of this meant. Kazuya Ota of the Kyushu University Observatory understood what that dome was doing better than anyone in the valley. He had no authority to act on it. His position allowed him to advise, nothing more. On May 29th, he formally demanded, twice in one day, that city headquarters pull the press and firefighters out of the area. Headquarters did not. The next day, he told visiting government ministers the flows were getting hotter, longer, and could reach the residential zone. He told a KTN journalist to his face, the place was dangerous. They needed to come down. On May 31st, he repeated the demand. Again, it went unmet. Some people listened earlier. From the night of May 28th, the newspaper Asahi Shimbun forbade its staff to go above the Tsutsuno stop at all. The other newsrooms stayed. Footage of the burning dome ran every evening, and leaving meant handing it to the competition. KTN had a fallback. On June 4th, they'd finish installing an unmanned camera at the fixed point, one that could film the dome with nobody on the slope. June 4th was a week away. On May 29th, the mountain reached people for the first time. An ash cloud swept over the crews on the slope. Nobody was hurt. Why nobody left after that, the sources do not answer. That evening, a flow set the forest on fire. An TV crew filmed the blaze up close. KTN had no such pictures. The question came down from the network. Why did the other stations have that footage and they didn't? The next day, KTN went back up, 1,000 feet higher than the main group. 5 days left until 4:08 p.m. on June 3rd. On June 1st, the evacuation recommendation was lifted for 3 of the 5 districts. For 2 of them, including the one holding the fixed point, it stayed in force. That same day, the city called the situation temporarily safe, and that applied to the ground below the Tsutsuno bus stop toward the coast. The fixed point sat well above it. Everyone heard the phrase. Almost nobody heard the geography inside it. 2 days left. On June 2nd, the firefighters returned to the forward post. The morning of June 3rd was rainy. The summit sat under cloud. Fewer journalists on the slope than usual. Glicken and the Crafts came up to the point anyway. They'd planned to film the dome from a helicopter. The cloud cover grounded that. So the cameras went up on the slope itself, about 250 yards closer to the summit than anyone else. Nobody stood higher than they did that day. From 3:30, the mountain went to work. 5 collapses in 35 minutes. Each one ran down the familiar channel. Each one died out at the familiar distance. After the first of them, police officer Kenpachi Sato rode his motorcycle up the road, warning everyone he met. The journalists heard him out. 2 of them started down. From the taxis, he got one answer. They couldn't leave and abandon their clients. Glicken and the Crafts stood highest of all. Sato went up to them too, the last person to speak with them, then turned his motorcycle back down. In those same minutes, the KTN field editor gave his crew one order. Forget the tripod, get out, now. The crew left their equipment where it stood and drove off. Every one of them made it out. Not everyone was leaving. At 8 minutes past 4, the dome collapsed on a scale it hadn't reached once in 2 weeks. The heavy part, blocks and ash, went down the Mizunashi channel and stopped where it always stopped, a little past 2 miles. On the fixed point, that's what they saw, the familiar cutoff in the familiar place. Except a dome collapse has 2 parts, and from 2.5 miles, the second one is almost invisible. Above the heavy mass, there's always a thin, turbulent cloud of scorching gas and the finest ash, lighter than the blocks. The channel doesn't gather it. While the collapses were small, that part had time to settle out. Not this time. This time, it came out of the valley and spread wide, carrying the full 2.5 miles. Over the platform with the cameras, over everything standing above it. On the tape recovered 14 years later, a police loudspeaker can be heard at 8 minutes past 4, telling the press to evacuate as well. A minute later, the picture goes white. Fukushima and Baba were still up there when it hit. They heard the crack a few seconds before, took it for the start of a mudflow, and got the truck turned nose down in time. The cloud caught them below Tsutsuno. Visibility dropped to 0. Hot gas came in through the blown-out rear window. Driving blind, they clipped a stone wall, but the truck came out the other side of the cloud. One of them got away with a burned neck. Sato was on the same road, a little lower. His handlebars wrenched hard. The back of his rain slicker shrank from the heat. He didn't stop, turned onto a side road, made it through. What exactly saved him in those seconds cannot be established. 2 minutes after the impact, 2 police officers at the Tsutsuno post got into a patrol car and drove up. One of them said it to the other. "There are still press up there. We have to get them out." Neither survived. The toll came to 43, with 9 more injured. 16 members of the media, 12 volunteer firefighters, 2 police officers, 4 taxi drivers, 6 local residents, 3 volcanologists. One piece of proof surfaced years later. The wrecked camera turned up in 2005, an anonymous phone call found in someone else's shed among unrelated equipment. The serial number traced it back to the television network NTV. The cassette inside had melted. Sony engineers spent a week straightening the tape, recovering it frame by frame. About 70% of the picture, nearly all of the sound. The Crafts had cameras on the slope that morning too. Nothing was ever recovered from them. On June 6th, the city announced it. At noon on June 7th, they put it into force. The thing they hadn't put into force in all the preceding weeks. A zone closed to everyone, without exception. Legal authority behind it. Penalties for entering. In 1980, a schedule saved Harry Glicken, an interview that put another man on his watch. At Unzen, the schedule belonged to the mountain. For 14 days, it held perfectly. Every collapse stopped on the same line. It broke once. That was enough for 43 people.